have some questions. Some big questions. Can we hate less and share more love? Can we keep going until we cure every disease? Can we make sure nobody is left behind? Can we find the courage to go further than we have gone? Can we change our ways before it's too late? Can we push our limits beyond the sky? With technology and humanity, we can go further together. Vodacom.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Loeries Creative Hour. So good to have all of you joining us. Today's a really special one, and one that I'm really excited about. But before we get into that, and before I share anything else, I just want to say hello to our guests who are joining us from Facebook. Elizabeth Nolte, who's Head of Marketing for Facebook Africa. Hi, Elizabeth, thanks for joining us. And Aviv Well, who's Head of Facebook Creative Shop at Facebook Africa. Hey, Aviv, thanks for joining us.
How's it going, everyone? Nice to be here.
Amazing. And what's always amazing and always what's unusual today as well is we have the team from Facebook joining us. And just a reminder again, we're live on Facebook as well. So to everyone joining us on Facebook, thanks for making the time to be part of the discussion, to tune in. Just a reminder as well, as we're doing this chat on Zoom, we cannot see your comments, we cannot see your questions. So I'm assisted by Clocky from the Loeries office, who is behind the scenes and managing everything. So still, feel free to share any questions that you have or any comments, and Clocky will pass them on to us as well, and we'll be able to chat from there. What's really important is that the Loeries Creative Hours are all powered and connected by Vodacom. So a huge thank you to Vodacom, who've come on board as our partners to support us and ensure that we're able to bring all of these really valuable conversations to you as part of the discussions we have. But jumping straight into it, so there's going to be a little bit of a difference today. So normally we come in and we start straight into the discussion. So today the little difference is going to be that what we're going to do is I'm going to take you through this first part of the research that we've been highlighting. And once we've gone through the research, I'm going to hand over to Aviv, who's going to be sharing some amazing insights in terms of beyond bias and helping us think about some of the biases that are inherent within us and things that we may not necessarily consider at every point. And then we'll have a little bit of a discussion based on everything that we're seeing. So jumping straight into it, I'm going to share the research and going into it. So I'll take you through some of the key insights and thoughts as to why this came about. So this is very valuable research. It's an analysis of gender representation in film advertising across Africa. And as we go through it, I'll take you through the methodology, because I'm sure there's lots of people out there who are really keen to understand what's the methodology, what's the basis behind this? Is this sound research that really has a robust sample? And obviously the answer is yes to all of those questions, but proof is always important, and that's what we're going to be taking you through this process. So let's give you an overview in terms of why this research was done. And in the truth is, we've got all the words here, but one of the things we know is that, advertising is really important, and creativity and the creative ecosystem is really important, ensuring that we move society forward. We are responsible for developing societal identity in many different areas, but we do know that this identity can be negatively impacted by stereotypes, and we need to create an awareness of some of the negative stereotypes that exist. And once we do this, we're able to change the landscape of the communication landscape and societal landscape. So what we did is we've had a lot of chats with a number of different partners who have highlighted some of these challenges. And one of those partners out there who are such great supporters of the creative ecosystem and across Africa and the Middle East, and not just in Africa as per the portfolio, but across Africa and the Middle East, across the area that we support, is Facebook. And we've had a lot of discussions with the team at Facebook who have been very open to supporting the Loeries and in supporting the creative industry and ensuring that we're able to to do work that really moves society forward and has a positive impact in society. And we've had a number of different discussions in terms of stereotypes, and that's inspired the ability to actually go out and conduct this research. And that inspiration is so important. It's so great to have amazing partners who inspire different thinking and help stretch us into new directions as well. So the first step in this process of this research was that we looked at all of the entries that we actually got last year. And we received a number of different entries. And we decided that we could actually take some of these entries, specifically in the film category, and at this step, we could create a dipstick in terms of the state of the industry, in terms of gender representation. But not just have this dipstick of what the state is right now, but we could go ahead and create a normative database over the years in terms of gender representation and what is happening and how this is actually changing in the marketplace. So what was the research methodology and how did we go about doing this? First, we needed a robust sample, and nothing could be better than looking at the film category from the Loeries 2020 awards. We cleaned this to a point of really making sure that we had the best examples of brand communication, multiple hours of processing. We had a huge team behind this. It was a massive team effort. And ultimately, we had 412 films which were analyzed to be part of this. And what we did is, going through this robust process and this verification, we analyzed screen time for gender and speaking time by gender. And the overall analysis allowed us to do this across multiple verticals, because we do get multiple verticals entering into the Loeries itself. So what did we get? The end result was a robust view of the overall film communication landscape across Africa, as well as the representation of male and female roles in various verticals. So what I'd love to do is jump straight into the actual research itself to give you a little bit of an overview. So first, the first part is obviously overall. Once we look at all 412 examples, what are we seeing? And sadly, I'm sure this part is no surprise to anyone. What we are seeing is that when we actually look at speaking time, men dominate the speaking time that is actually happening right now in the industry. So 61% of the speaking time went to men versus only 39% for women. If you look at the screen time overall, we see that men have 57% of the time, whereas women have 43% of the time. Now, what's useful is, as we go through this, we can start gleaming a little bit of insights. So let's have a look at this little anomaly that we have here. So women speak only 39% of the time, but they appear 43% of the time on screen. Why do we have this deviation? And this 4 percentage points really tells us that in certain examples, what we are seeing is that women are being used as props. They're not given an opportunity to speak, but they're being placed in for the sake of just merely being in the ad itself, to say that we've done our representation job, or just to have them as part of the background. So that is very, very fascinating and interesting. And we'll be able to see more examples as per category. So if we start looking at the various verticals and analyzing the various verticals, this is what we're actually seeing. In alcohol, the results show that 69% of the time men have the speaking time, and 68% of the time men have the screen time. So very equal. It's dominated by men really having the lion's share of the time on screen and being able to speak, while women only appear about just over 30% of the time in this particular category. So obviously there's a lot of work to be done for most alcohol brands to try and show women in different categories. And we had a chat. So one of the other projects that Facebook is supporting is the Loeries Youth Committee. And we had an amazing session with the Loeries Youth Committee yesterday where, sorry, I get my days wrong, on Tuesday. We had an amazing session on Tuesday where we also had the United Nations Women team with Unstereotype Alliance involved. And we were having a discussion. And this was one of the things that surprised a number of the young women who are part of the Loeries Youth Committee, because they went, women are partaking in alcohol. This is not a category that's purely male dominated. There's nothing on this that says that this is a male category. Yet if you look at ads, be it in whiskey or in cognac, with some of the examples they brought up, why is it that men are only shown in these examples? I want to go through the research relatively quickly so that we can give Aviv time to actually be able to share the amazing research that he has from his side, and that we can also then have the discussion. So just a reminder that this research will be available to anyone that wants it. It's absolutely available to everyone in the industry. And unlike most research that happens where there's a charge to it, there's no charge. This is available to everyone. This is for all of you to use, to build insights, to understand how we can actually change some of the stereotypes that happen in our industry. Automotive, again, some of the same examples that we're seeing, which is men dominating the speaking time at 76%. But again, women have 44% of the screen time as compared to 24% of the speaking time. Again, another example of women being used as props in this particular category again. And as we say, this is not for every single brand. But what we are seeing is the majority of brands, the brands who are really, truly getting out there and having most of the communication. This is unfortunately a reality of women being used as props, as we can see. If we move on and look at another category, such as a clothing brand, and if we look at clothing brand stuff, so these are not retailers, these are actual brands themselves. And one of the caveats that I want to do, in a few categories, you're going to notice a little caveat. This is one of those categories where our sample size is not statistically significant. And again, anyone who has to go through a lot of research understands that you need a statistically significant sample to be able to make massive conclusions. What we can do then is get an overview on categories like this. So overview in terms of clothing brands, we're seeing that women dominate the speaking time at 69% and at 61% having that amount of screen time, while men have 31% of the speaking time and 39% of the screen time. Again, one of the things that we actually need to do is there's a slight example of men actually being used as props over here, which is kind of surprising because only 31% of speaking time, yet 39%, that 8 percentage point difference shows that in certain examples, men are being used as props in these brands. So very unusual, very interesting to notice that this is happening. If we look at consumer packaged goods or fast-moving consumer goods, as it's named in a number of different markets across Africa and the Middle East, what we're seeing that's really surprising is that in a lot of the examples that we looked at, and again, a statistically significant group of ads that we actually analyzed, 54% of the speaking time went to men. And again, it's more or less flat in terms of the screen time at 55%, while women had only 46% of the speaking time and 45% of the screen time. If we explore e-commerce, speaking in screen time, we're seeing that e-commerce is heavily dominated by men. 62% of the speaking time went to men versus 55% of the screen time. Once again, another example of a category where women have 38% of the speaking time and 45% of the screen time, highlighting this disparity of being used as a prop within this category itself. So obviously we're seeing in different categories, you could have women used as a prop, in other categories, men are used as a prop, but there's obviously this need for equality to come through in some of the communication. Education now is where, again, we have a little challenge in the sample size, again, not being statistically significant, but it is still valuable for us to be able to get some insights in terms of what is the temperature of this category, what is actually happening. In this particular category, men have very little speaking time, only 14%, yet 47% of the screen time. Already we're seeing this is another category where the numbers are indicating that men have been used as props, while women have 86% of the speaking time and 53% of the screen time. Entertainment and media, we see there's a slight advantage to women having 54% of the speaking time and 53% of the screen time. So relatively flat, so pretty equal, which is good, and a little bit of work to be done to actually get to that equal point, because men have 46% of the speaking time and 47% of the actual screen time. Please feel free to share any questions you have. Just a reminder to everyone who's joining through on our Facebook Live feed, you have the ability to just comment on the comment section or say any questions if you have anything. I'm sure all of this is very, very interesting, or you can always contact us at info@loeries.com to get a copy of this report or for any other additional information as well. So moving on to our next category, which is financial services, which is a very valuable category in terms of identifying and changing views of people in society, especially because there's such a financial link to it. There's a huge disparity here. 65% of the speaking time goes to men, huge, versus only 35% for women. And again, 58% of the screen time going to men with 42% for women. Again, that anomaly, that picture that we're seeing in certain categories when women are being used for as props, this is one of those categories it's so valuable in society and makes such a big difference. And therefore, this disparity is pretty concerning to see 35% of the speaking time for women versus 42% of the screen time. Home improvement and hardware. Now, this is, again, interesting. I spoke to a lot of people, and you check your own biases when you do this. And again, as a reminder, sample size, not statistically significant, but still very valuable in order to be able to get a good view. And the stereotype tends to be that in home improvements and hardware, you're going to see men dominating. And what's interesting, though, you do see this pattern emerge in the speaking time with a male voice, strong male voice, 55% of the time to only 45%. But here's the interesting disparity. This is one of those most strangest categories because men have only 27% of the screen time versus 73% for women. So strategically, there's obviously something being done to show and represent women a lot more, but the male voice is being used to actually communicate all of the key ideas and thinking, which is quite challenging. If we look at minor verticals, and let me give you an idea in terms of how this actually came about. So you have certain minor verticals, developing categories, smaller categories where we do not get the ability to actually go out and group them individually. So what we do is we group them all together and have a look at it. And when you look at minor verticals, which is our developing categories, it gives us a good idea in terms of those brands that are now deciding to start spending on advertising, those agencies that are just emerging and spending into new categories. What is the view? How are they spending? What is their logic when they're actually spending on this? And what you see is that in their speaking time, 85% of the speaking time went to men versus 77% for screen time versus only 15% speaking time for women and 23% of screen time. What we are seeing is, and this is the scary part, in smaller categories, in developing categories, there still seems to be a default towards the male view into their communication. So a lot of younger brands, a lot of younger categories that are undeveloped are still using this male voice. So that's quite challenging, and that's something that we should be looking at. And that's something that in the creative space and that agencies need to be challenging to say that in different areas, as you develop, you should not be necessarily only defaulting to a male voice. If we look at nonprofits and nonprofit screen time, totally different picture. Women dominate. So we're not seeing enough men in this. And this is, again, statistically accurate. And we have a robust sample here. Women have 67% of the speaking time and 60% of the screen time, while men have only 33% of the speaking time and 40% of the screen time. Again, men are being used as props in this category, while primarily women are being targeted. Again, just as challenging when you see this kind of picture emerge, because there should be absolutely no reason why in these kind of categories you should have this disparity. If we look at restaurants, and in restaurants we're seeing, strange enough, there should be no logical reason why a restaurant should target males more. Everyone eats as per every single category over here. But this difference is just concerning and very, very difficult to digest, which is that 85% of the speaking time goes to men, with only 15% of the speaking time going to women, whereas 70% of the screen time goes to men and 30% of the screen time goes to women. So women, again, are being used as props. But even when they're being used as props, you tend to find there's still this massive disparity in terms of the screen time. And these are for restaurants. There's no logical reason that anyone can look at a restaurant and go that this is normal. This is a strange anomaly, and is something that if you're working in the space of restaurants that you should maybe even have a look at and have a look as to why this is happening. If we look at travel, something that not many people have a chance to do right now. So therefore our sample size in this category is relatively small. So not statistically significant, but definitely very informative rather than definitive. What we are seeing is that men enjoy 75% of the speaking time with 67% of the screen time, whereas we have a look at it and we see that women have 25% of the speaking time and 33% of the screen time. In retail, overall, you're seeing a clearer picture emerge, which is fantastic to have a look at, that the speaking time is equal between men and women. So great job to those in retail. Obviously, in terms of screen time, though, there's some work to be done because men still enjoy a little bit more screen time than women. And then if we look at technology and telecoms, 72% of the speaking time going to men versus only 28% for women, and 63% of the screen time to men and 37% for women. So largely dominated with that male target and a male view, which again, in technology and telecoms, there should be no logical reason that this should be the case. So overall summary, what do we know about this so that we can get into our chat with Aviv and Elizma and be able to unpack this? So the inaugural Loeries analysis of gender representation in advertising across Africa has shared some really, really interesting insights. And again, we can unpack this and go through it a lot more. This generally would need probably 2 or 3 hours for us to really unpack it to a full extent, but we have just an hour today. So what are we seeing? What are we seeing in this? There's some categories that show women with an advantage in speaking and screen time. Let's look at those categories. There's clothing brands, education, entertainment, media, nonprofit. So what we're seeing is that the key challenge is that this only represents 25% of the research categories. So in 25%, women have some sort of advantage, but it leaves out all the super major commercial categories. It's education, it's entertainment media, it's nonprofit. These are the categories that are really targeting women. Yet if you look at all of the finance categories, restaurants, telecoms, that's not happening. So there exists a strong potential for improvements in a number of verticals. And what we're going to be doing as Loeries is to continue monitoring and educating the industry about improvements in this. And just a reminder, if you want a copy of this report, we will make it available on our website, but you can mail us at info@loeries.com or obviously call us on +27 11 772 1220 if you do want a copy of this. So thank you so much for your time. I want to make sure that we can have some time to chat to Aviv and Elizma. Aviv, you have some obviously amazing insights in terms of beyond bias, which again tie in very nicely to the discussion we have. So Aviv, over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Pritesh. I'm just going to share my screen. I hope everyone can see it with my many screens in front of me. So yeah, that research is it's as fascinating as it is, I think, inherently known. You know, the first time I saw it, I was like, I know all this stuff, and that's, you know, one way to look at the problem is if we're so aware of it, why we not do anything about it? And the truth is, we all have work to do. And from a beyond bias point of view, it's actually a program that Creative Shop at Facebook, you know, has put together, which is basically designed to foster awareness as to why it matters to reduce stereotypes in advertising and how to, you know, question all these assumptions and promote a more diverse and inclusive approach to the work we put out into the world. There was actually an Ipsos study done, I think, in like 28 markets that said that 7 out of 10 people feel that ads don't represent them at all. Absolutely not. And that's a big problem. And that, I think it was something like 64% of people feel that advertisers don't do enough to eliminate, you know, sexist gender roles. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And diversity and inclusion are becoming more and more important to people, and they should become even more important to brands, you know, especially looking back at the last year and a half, where, you know, brand values and the way brands reacted to the pandemic and continually react, and how they put a more human lens on the work they do actually creates more affinity. And the brands that don't are actually finding it really tough to do business. So, you know, from a conscience point of view and from a business point of view, it makes sense for brands to think about this. But as people, as in advertising, who, you know, we say are very influential, what are we influencing? What kind of power do we have, and what are we using it for? Because the truth is, you know, we need to open our eyes, whether those results that you put forward were intentional or not, whether people intentionally, you know, cast men versus women this way, or is it a behavior that was learned over time? You know, this is by no means a name and shame. It's more of, there's a problem and we need to band together and solve it, because there's a lot of work that our industry creates and puts out there for millions of people and for children to watch. And we need to be very careful with the roles that we're portraying, that kids see women in a certain way or men in a certain way only, and they grow up thinking they can only be boxed in this way or that way. And I think it's our responsibility as change makers, as creatives, as influential people who reach millions of people with our ads all the time, you know, to really take a step back and look and open our eyes to what is happening and seeing how we can move us forward. And that's where Beyond Bias came in. It's essentially this tool that Creative Shop created to work with brands and with creative agencies and media agencies to help craft more inclusive and authentic and above all, honest, very, very honest, people first ideas that put people at the center of what we're doing. And it's really this way to help everyone in the industry interrogate every aspect of the creative work that we do. So from the brand to the products, to the way we're writing, to the way we're casting, it really is this opportunity to address all the types of biases, from gender to race to class, you name it, and actually, be intentional about what we put out and not so automatic in what we put out. And what's really interesting is that, what we noticed in a lot of our research was that there's a lot of inexistence in a lot of campaigns. There's an absent representation of certain groups like LGBTQ+ and disabled people, unless there's an event for them, unless it's Pride or unless it's Paralympics, and then they're at the forefront. But where are people like this being represented in everyday advertising, in everyday life? There's also a limited presence. We're finding that there's also this historically an imbalance of genders, as you showed in a lot of your research. This is not new to people. It's just now it's been formalized by the Loeries and what we're trying to do. And what we've noticed, and this is around the world, not just here, is that often the higher value categories are dominated by men, and the more family care and like that kind of categories is led by women. And we know that that's not balanced. We know that that's not the way to really portray any authentic nature of the world. So, this is also something really interesting. And then another thing to look at is also inaccurate portrayal. There are, as you said, props. There's this idea of tokenism. There's this idea of, well, we're just going to put a checklist and go tick, 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 but not actually identify why they are there, and how to use people authentically, and how to use men and women and the characters they're portraying in the ads in a way that's believable. So we have to ask ourselves, how can we move away from this type of behavior to a more inclusive and representative and more honest way? And one way is to stop being all about awareness, because I don't think people don't know as much as we think. It's about really, really acting. How do we make this a habit? How do we every day make this so natural that this is never a problem? This is not something that we have to discuss on Facebook Live or on Zoom or anything like that, that it becomes part of the natural behavior. Because, it's one thing to say we have to get this right, which is a lot of stress and not really, doable in the short term. We have to get progress. We have to start. We have to make this sort of an everyday effort that, helps to self-improvement for the industry. It can't be so much pressure to get it right in the first go. It's going to take a lot of work to figure out what the brand's role is in this, what the audience's role, or what are the stereotypes. Really interrogating every part of the process from start to finish, and seeing if, once you step back, that this represents people, represents values, represents equality, and a balance that is so necessary. And part of the Beyond Bias program are these very difficult questions that we ask brands and creatives and strategists and product designers, you name it, whoever wants to put up their hand and say, I want to build more diverse work and more inclusive work. We've got a range of questions that we ask, and these are them. So we interrogate how to question the role you're playing, right? So as a brand, have you earned the right to speak about certain topics? Have you earned the right to not display gender roles, in an equal measure? Have you earned the right to speak on this topic, so that you're not just speaking and hopping on a bandwagon, right? It's really, really important that you understand the authenticity of what you're saying, because if you put out a message to millions of people, it better be authentic and it better be believable, in this day and age. Another question is, well, how do you widen your impact, and how do you better serve all the diverse audiences that are in front of us? It's amazing how, every time you look at, say, targeting or things like that, it is immensely incredible how many types of interests and how many types of people there are out there, and how many opportunities there are to be meaningful and relevant, and not do a one-size-fits-all, because we know everyone is different. And advertising's come a long way. It used to be, a big message for the masses, and we hope it hits. Now you can get so specific. You can really mean something to people and make them feel heard and make them feel that they matter. And if you're not doing that as a brand, I would ask you, why not? And if you're doing it, how do you do it better? Because we can always do better. Another way to look at it is also, how do you reject these stereotypes that are so automatic? it's not because people are bad or people, want to stereotype. It's just become so much of an inherent nature. So how do we pull back and go, we're actually being stereotypical amongst women in this ad, in this way we've scripted them. How do we pull back and go, what's the authentic way to do this? And to really, really stress test this stuff and not be precious about a moment or precious about a line or precious about a look, but to really go and think, what is going to be the right thing to do? And then once you've gone through all that, you really reality check your work, put it in front of people, pressure test it, stress test it, put it in front of people that are not yes people, put it in front of real people and go, does this speak to you? Does it not? What do you wish we said? Does it offend you? Does it not? And then build and iterate on that. Because at the end of the day, if you're not putting it in front of the audience that you want to speak to, you'll never know if it actually works until it's out there. And by then it's often too late. So the idea is to ask these questions before you put things out into the world at mass, before you have to answer for a lot of decisions that were made in boardrooms, before you had the opportunity to actually give yourself this, this window to do the right thing. And then once you're there, how do you infuse this inclusion throughout the rest of your brand, throughout the rest of your communication? These things are really, 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 really important. And I'm just going to go to them really, really quickly. Because essentially it's this integral part of our roles as creatives, right? We are the ones coming up with the stories. We're the ones, identifying the strategies and shaping the way brands are being formed and selling ideas into boardrooms, convincing people that this is right. And I think it's really, along with, what do they say? With great power comes responsibility. It's absolutely the responsibility of creatives and everyone else involved, but particularly the creatives, to make sure that we're guiding and shaping society in a way that is as diverse and inclusive as possible. And again, we're not alone. You spoke about the Unstereotype Alliance, meeting with the youth committee. Well, it's amazing, right? Because we do a lot of work with them as well. And there was a study that they did with Kantar, which was incredible. They tested, I think it was like 3,500 ads in 46 countries with over 1,000 brands in about 29 different categories of advertising. And they pulled from that data that the more progressive the advertising, in other words, the more diverse and inclusive the advertising was, the better the business was, the more sales, the more affinity they got, right? Which again, it follows the notion that I said at the very beginning of this, of my talk, which is, we need to be inherently aware of how we are behaving as brands and as creatives and the work we put out, because people really care about that stuff. They really do care, and they're making purchase decisions based on how brands behave. And who is helping brands behave? It's creatives, it's agencies. So this is Beyond Bias in a nutshell, and I'm going through it really, really quickly. If you guys want to hop on and see more about it, we've actually got an Instagram account, which is @CS_Beyond_Bias, Creative Shop Beyond Bias. Join us. It's full of this information. There's ways to do workshops. There's ways to really stress test and interrogate every brief you have, or product launch, or product, or brand, and put it to the test. And from a creative shop point of view, because our inherent role is to help amplify brilliant thinking on our platforms and really push the potential of what brands can do on Facebook and Instagram and Messenger and WhatsApp. We want to craft more inclusive, authentic, and honest people first ideas with you guys. So we're already working with some brands. We'd love to work with more out there who are interested in putting their hands up and going, we want to be as diverse and inclusive and authentic as possible. And that's Beyond Bias. I'm happy to take questions or just discuss now. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Aviv. Yeah, and if anyone does have any questions, remember we're, I always find that with research, I know everyone's always a bit shy to go into and interrogate the numbers or ask about any of the other concepts out there, but I'd love to hear the thoughts from anyone. So if there are any questions, please feel free to share it. Elisma, we haven't had a chance to hear your voice, so I'm going to hand it over to you to say hello and share some of your thoughts in terms of the research and in terms of the value of Beyond Bias as well.
Yes, no, thank you, Pritesh, and thank you, Aviv, as well for sharing. I just want to start by saying well done to the Loeries for working on this amazing piece of research and saying, let's put a dipstick, as you said, in the ground and let's test the waters. Let's see where we are at. And I think that there is so much to debate in that data, and so many things that we need to ask ourselves, like what is behind this? Is it just legacy behavior? Or, you know, is there actually some science that says, well, men are better at selling financial products and women are better at promoting education? And I think the risk obviously here is that we are just perpetuating what we think we already know. So yeah, so I think this is fascinating. I would love to see how this develops over time. And, you know, if we do the same research again in a year's time, are we seeing different results? And then as the Viv says, what are we doing as an industry to say, if we do have a problem, to say, how do we impact it? So how do we drive results to make sure that come next year, come the year after, we see these numbers change?
Amazing. And again, just to reiterate, thank you to you and the entire Facebook team for the inspiration and the support. You know, it's really useful to understand that we're part of an ecosystem. And sometimes it's areas that we may not, even as Loeries, we may not even consider. And it's always amazing having discussions with you and Viv and understanding the challenges that are being brought in from a global level. But what's really interesting, and maybe Viv, we can hand over to you on this, is what's really interesting is you highlighted that the research that was done by the Unstereotype Alliance, which is convened by UN Women, and Kantar actually showed that the softer categories tend to have a very strong woman voice and presence, whereas the hardcore commercial categories tend to be dominated by men. Now, interestingly, that was duplicated in the research that we saw. We saw exactly the same results here across the African continent. I mean, and again, we always look at it and go, we're different. We're very different. We're different from anyone else around the world. But this proves we're not, right?
No, we're people. We're humans like anyone else, and we all grew up watching the same movies and listening to the same music in different ways, and similar cultural, you know, I guess, influences that shaped culture where we are today. So, you know, while it's you know, depending which way you look at it, it's either great or not, these results, as Elizabeth was saying, maybe there's a reason for it. It's really important to know that this is a global challenge. Mm-hmm. We're not doing any better or worse than anyone else. Even from a Facebook point of view, we are constantly looking inside our organization to go, how do we be better at stuff? How do we include more people? How do we open ourselves up to everything that's happening around the world? And I think the more every business does that, the more they'll mean things to people. You know, it's really important that in this, especially in this day and age, where who you are and who you stand for as a human, as a brand, is backed up by what you do, not just what you say. And I think this is an opportunity. This really is. I mean, I'm so excited about this research because it's not just, you know, an opinion. It's real numbers. And what they mean, they can be interpreted in many ways. But in order to interpret it, we've got to collaborate and we've got to stress test it too. We've got to have these fierce debates and go, well, this is why we did this and this is why we did that. And it was good or it wasn't good. And let's really put like feelings to the side, because again, it's not about naming and shaming and going, well, you're doing it right, you're doing it wrong. I think it's as an industry deciding that change needs to happen. It's only going to change if we begin. And Beyond Bias and Stereotype Alliance, you know, your Loeries research are ways to do that. Not the only ways, but there are definitely ways to begin this and to know that we're all on this journey together. We did incredible work with Sephora overseas. It was going into the world of fragrances, you know, where you've got ads that are all these like bronzed people that are photoshopped to the nines that no one could ever be, ever. I don't think anyone exists like that. And they go, this is beauty. And it's so much stress and so much pressure on people to be like that. Whereas we flipped the script and we made it about the product. We made it about the ingredients. We made it about the promise of the product. And it actually performed better than all the models posing with the fragrances. So we threw it back to that industry and said, well, what you're doing worked for you, but is it the best way to do it? Is it the best way to drive business? Is it the best way to represent people? You know, we don't want to not, you know, put pretty people on pictures because, I mean, they need jobs too. But at the same point, there needs to be a reason. There needs to be meaning behind what you're doing, not just a playbook that you go, well, men sell more cars, therefore, you know? And I think that's what's really, really important. I believe I'm also taking way too much speaking time as a guy.
No.
Elizabeth, what are your thoughts?
Yes. Liz?
No, I agree. And I mean, I like your point there of saying this is not no one company's problem. We all do need to look internally. And Facebook does that rigorously. Diversity is very, very important to us. And we hired a chief diversity officer, Maxine Williams, a few years ago. She drives a very, very strong agenda to look at everything from how we build our products, right? Because our products need to be inclusive and make people feel represented. And, you know, if you're differently abled, you need to be able to use them. But then you also need to look at who's building the products, right? So we're only going to build diverse work if we're hiring diverse marketers and engineers. And so how we expand our talent pool is something that we very much look at. And we're also a brand. We also put out marketing. So we've really had to go and say, well, what's our sort of marketing manifesto? How are we making sure that our work is diverse, which is challenging from a company who has really sort of had its roots in the US, right? And now is global and needs to be representative of that growing global community. But it's so internally, yes, we need to look, but then this is really an industry problem. And I think that's where initiatives like Untitled Alliance, which I encourage you all to join if you're not a member yet, please do, as well as working with the Loeries on the research, and then bringing programs like Beyond Bias and workshops to the market together with you is very important. I mean, we launched also something in the UK recently, which I think is a great example of working with industry called BRIM. So it's about Black representation in marketing. And I know, Pritesh, this piece of research is only about gender. We had to start somewhere. Yeah. But, you know, ultimately, if we're talking about diversity, we are talking about why is there almost zero LGBTQ representation in our campaigns? You know, why, you know, what about disability? And definitely, obviously, race representation being really important. And that similarly is it's together with our peers as Unstereotype, as, you know, together with other founding partners like Unilever, like Google, coming together and saying, okay, well, how can I learn from you? How can we, you know, take some of the tools out there that exist, but also how can we create new ideas? And that's where I'm really, really, really excited about the youth committee that you've launched. I mean, this amazing group of young, diverse talent, and they just come with a incredible sort of fresh and new perspective to this problem, because of some of it, they just view it in a very different way. I mean, I was speaking to one of them the other day, and she was like, "Well, my generation doesn't see gender. They're so fluid in the space, and you know." Like it's something like when you advertise makeup, they're not even thinking that we need to advertise makeup just for women, like, because in their generation this isn't even a product anymore just for women. So the way that we might have grown up with it, and they're interrogating why do some of the leading beauty brands not have makeup for different skin colors. And so I think there's a lot that we can learn from the youth, and I know that we've put the challenge to them and told them, how do you help us solve this problem? How do you influence organizations? So I'm looking forward to seeing what they come back with and how we can help bring some of those ideas to life.
Amazing. And also, Lizma, you're highlighting the challenges of also representation by race. Something that's useful, because you're going to see this later and go, wait, they didn't launch at that point. But as we build this database and we go, I think at the first step, one of the things we wanted to do is share this gender disparity so that you can apply a mind and the industry can apply the mind to it. But we have done the race research as well. It's sitting in our digital vault here at the Loeries, and we've got that. And as we go through and continue doing this, we'll continue adding those different steps. And so we can keep applying our minds to the different aspects and different challenges of our industry. So we do have that data. I've seen it, and I can tell you that that would be a whole nother discussion, a much, much longer discussion as well, because of the disparity that comes, especially when you start taking two dynamics such as gender and race, and how it changes by gender and race as well. But Lizma, the other thing is, Aviv, since you said Lizma's not getting enough speaking time, I'm gonna since you said it. So, but one of the other important things as well is, Lizma, you've highlighted that within Facebook, it's so important internally in your hiring practices and the thoughts behind building products to have these ideas in terms of these beyond bias principles, should I call it that, in terms of everything that you do. But what's really amazing is that you also invest and support other organizations out there, such as the Unstereotype Alliance, such as the Loeries, and all of these other amazing organizations who are doing work in the space around the world. I mean, obviously, you could always go, we're just doing it internally and we'll focus internally and we'll do it here and we'll stay there. But it seems to be this desire to really create this good and create this impact globally. So why is it so important as an organization as well to ensure that we're creating impact in these spaces globally and creating change?
Yeah, I mean, as an organization for us, it's important, and Mark Zuckerberg has said this, Sheryl Sandberg has said this, that we really, really believe that more diverse teams create better work. So it's diversity isn't just about doing the right thing. It's actually about being better as a company and building better products and building better creative work. So I think that is really important to understand as well. And then, you know, I think it's, as we've talked about this, I think it's our duty as a very big player in this industry, as it is of many other big players out there, to put our heads together and see how do we tackle an issue which is I think we've reached a stage in history where we really can't excuse some of what we're seeing anymore. I think nowhere more was it sort of highlighted last year with what happened around George Floyd and the US. And you know, Facebook also reacted very strongly to that, to relook at how do we support Black businesses, how do we, you know, fight racial injustice. With COVID, there was a big flare up around discrimination against Asians at the stage when you know, COVID was just getting born in that side of the world, and that's something that Facebook got very involved in. And then obviously, you know, if I can't sort of have this discussion without also just addressing the issue of this very basics of hate speech on our platform, right? And so hate speech is something that we absolutely have zero tolerance towards, and investing a lot in making sure that we have the right AI, we have the right real people in centers double checking things, and that we have the right tools to help users report anything that they feel is uncomfortable. Because you made this point at the start, yes, we all want to look at ads that makes us feel like we're included as women or wherever we're coming from. But there's also like a real world harm impact if we don't address stereotypes, if we don't change the way that we portray people. It can have an actual impact in certain countries where, you know, women feel unsafe online, or where you know, the LGBTQ community feel threatened. So I think it's important for us to realize that this isn't just a nice to have. It is something that causes real world harm as well.
Amazing. I've got a question from Prudence who asks, Viv, for you. I think most people don't, strange enough, there are some people who don't know what Facebook Creative Shop is. So it's, can you tell us more about Creative Shop and what Creative Shop actually does with Beyond Bias, and how does it actually see this in the industry?
Yeah, so the Creative Shop, it's a good way to think about it is it's the creative division of Facebook. And what we do is we work in every country where there's a presence of Facebook with brands and creative agencies to amplify the creative work on our platforms. There's around 300 of us globally, so we're quite small. But we work directly with creative people as a creative partner to amplify the work. And one of the things we do, besides, you know, your typical campaigns, is also socially minded work like Beyond Bias. So we will run workshops with brands and stress test, you know, all those questions that I presented before on live briefs. For example, I worked with an auto brand about 2 years ago. And we had a massive workshop, and it was the launch of a new car, and it was this amazing opportunity. And, you know, we got to the part of the strategy where they were talking about the personas and who they're going to speak to and the targeting, and they were all men. Every single one of them was men. And I was just like, this is a problem. Like, this can't work. So we did some internal research and saw that on our platforms, women were actually not only speaking about the particular car, but the type of car, and that they couldn't wait to get the car because it was a big, safe car for South Africa, and women feel safe in this car. And we presented the research back to the agencies and to the clients, and they would have missed out on 25% of their sales if we hadn't, exactly right, if we hadn't gone people are really talking about this, but not men only, women. Like, you need to think about that in a different way. And this is one of the ways, from a creative shop point of view, we threw some light onto a challenge that maybe wasn't aware in the room, not intentionally. I think it's just, when you see a big car, you go, well, the big butt's got to drive the big car. I think that's inherent. And we stress tested the thinking, the strategy, we flipped it, and it became a diverse campaign. It became, there are ads targeting women alone, specifically around why this car should mean a lot to them and enable them in their lives. And it changed the whole way that the brand and the agency and I looked at work, because it wasn't just this autopilot of, well, big, tough car could only be for men. It actually opened up to, well, it's for anyone who wants to feel safe. It's for anyone who wants to, be in this big car or drive big cars. And the work was great. The work was wonderful. So that's one way that we work with agencies and clients with the Beyond Bias lens. But inherently, we're a creative partner to the industry. We are there as a creative shop to amplify all the amazing thinking that goes into the campaigns and making sure that they're actually expressing and using the potential of our platforms. And I work tirelessly every day with the most amazing people, so I'm very lucky. And I wear the shirts because I'm proud.
I want a shirt, but I guess you only get it if you get to Creative Shop and then you get the T-shirt, right?
I'll get you a shirt. What size are you? Don't say it online.
No, don't say that online, right? then the body shaming starts. That's a whole nother discussion. But jokes aside as well, also what's amazing for everyone to also know is that one of the heads of Creative Shop, Ginevra Capechi Gagliota, and I always hope I don't butcher her name when I say it, is going to be jury president for the digital category as well. So she will hopefully be bringing some of these amazing insights and this beyond bias thinking as we actually look at some of the work that's happening. But again, I mean, Elizabeth, as we have a look at this as well, the motor vehicle automotive category is always really, really strange in the sense that I think of, there's always a sports car brand who's and I'm not going to say the brand obviously, but their advertising, I absolutely love it. But after we did this research and I looked at this and I went back and looked at the ads and I went, I have never heard a woman's voice in their ads. I've never seen a woman in the ads. And I have to say that even at a point where you think, and this is my personal reflection, sometimes even at a point when you actually look at it and think that you generally will understand some areas, there's always these opportunities to learn. So this is also an opportunity for some self-introspection and understanding and looking at the industry in a whole new way as well. I think we're getting warmed up as well. So, but they're doing this anonymously. So we got a question, but it's from anonymous. It's a safe space if you want to share your name, but if you don't and you want to ask questions anonymously, you're welcome to do so. So the question is, and Elizabeth, I'm going to pass this on to you before I even read it. How does one communicate the need to prioritize diversity to the leaders within our companies? And I think that's a great, great question.
No, I think that is, and I think that's a big part of the challenge here, because I think going to the CMO tomorrow and saying you need more women in your car ads, isn't going to be necessarily the most effective. And I think it's coming back to two things that we mentioned. The one is your organization prioritizing diversity? And sorry if there's a banging in the background. I have a burst pipe, which has like been the bad end of my day. But is this important for us as an organization? I mean, that's where you need to start. And I think challenging your C leadership suite on that. And that's where I think the young people coming in as well and challenging the senior leadership on that is important. I think that the second is the point I mentioned around will this help me sell more products at the end of the day? So will I be doing better work if I'm more diverse? And will I see the ROI results? And that's where I think I've idea about testing is really important. So we need more and more companies who are brave enough to step up and test those stereotypes, to go like, okay, let's do a campaign around education, and let's do one where a male is speaking and one where a female is speaking, or whatever it is that we want to test. And let's put some proof points and some data behind this, because I think that's going to shift behavior. And then I think I want to throw this back at you, Pritesh. I mean, one of the reasons that we really wanted to work with Creative Awards is because they have the power to drive change, right? So if you tomorrow say, well, one of the criteria of entering the Loeries is that you have to show who worked on this campaign and show me a diversity report on like how many, was this car ad, or to pick on the automotive industry, created equally by men and women, or are we still seeing that most car ads are worked on by men? Because that's also an issue. So I'm actually going to throw that question back to you and say, like, what can the Loeries do in terms of implementing criteria to influence change?
And I think you're absolutely right. And one of the things you're going to see is not only do ads that generally embrace and accept diversity do great from a business perspective, as Aviv has highlighted, but also one of the things that we're also seeing is that they win awards, and awards like the Loeries. And I think I want everyone to know, the Loeries is not a warm, fuzzy award. It's not you get this and you feel warm and fuzzy and that's all you get out of it. One, at the first step, it is an absolute proof and testament to the amazing work that's being done by the creative community and getting that award. And the second step is once you actually win it, the work starts for the account directors and account management team and for the leadership of the organizations and agencies to be able to take that and go out to the industry and say, look at the work we're doing, look at the amazing things that our team does, and this is why you need to work with us. And we're seeing examples of this. As an example is work being done by First for Women and Fox P2, who actually won a Grand Prix for their work on 16 Days of Light. And that was in the out-of-home ambient category. And what's amazing about that campaign is obviously it highlighted a massive issue in terms of gender-based violence. But not only that, as Elizabeth highlighted, that entire campaign was done by women. It was an all-women team in terms of shooting the ad, going out, conceptualizing, working on it. And that really shows that the testament is not only just going out there and creating this communication for the sake of creating it, but it's also about creating it with some real purpose behind the scenes and the work they're actually doing. And Aviv, just maybe again, we've run out of time, but maybe just where did the time go? But maybe just one of the things that we can actually chat about, if we can take a few more minutes as well, is how this actually translates to good business. And I want to reiterate that point because we're seeing examples of that in the award ecosystem, and you highlighted that. And I think that's, as we hit towards the tail end, also to highlight that being truly representative as a brand does equal to good business. And can you just elaborate on what you've seen from some of the research and some of the work that you've actually done?
Yeah, so some of the research that came out of the last year or so was, I want to get the stat wrong, it was something like every 2 in 3 people globally would actively buy from a brand that is humanely humanely reacted to the pandemic. So this is a big thing. It's a global stat where most people who have spending power, who are there to back a brand or buy products and help those brands reach their KPIs and all that stuff. Consumers are out there and people are out there to really get behind the brands who are standing for something, who are there to enable the world to be a better place and to not be profit first and people second. And some good examples are, we work with Cadbury, for example. So I just worked with the guys at Ogilvy and Cadbury to launch the most incredible literacy campaign, where it was all about creating books for kids in their mother tongue, in the local languages. And the biggest issue was that most books in this country are in English, and English is not the most widely spoken first language of people. So how do we help not only everybody read and then build the literacy up, but in their own language? So we came up with an incredible way to not only put the word out and get people to join in and write these books, but we found an amazing way to speak to people in their own languages. It wasn't one ad that went out to everybody. We managed to get Zulu ads and Sotho ads and every language ads to those specific people. It speaks to them in their own language in a way that makes complete sense and is relevant and got them on board. And it translated into most incredible results and most incredible affinity. The campaign's just ending now, but it's become thousands of books in mother tongue languages for the first time ever, all because a brand, stood up and said, we want to do good. And the agency had this incredible idea, and Creative Shop came in to help them build it on our platforms, and it did so much good, and it's continuing to do so much good, and it's opening up a whole new world to be relevant to people. And it's going to translate into big business, because again, if you see a business doing well, and you see a business giving back to the community, you're going to choose them. You're not going to choose, the other brand on the shelf you don't know much about or you don't think does any good. So that's just one example to share on that. I could speak for hours on this, but I think we all have to go to work. Oh, and you're on mute.
I'm on mute. Basically, I also heard some little knocking in the back here, so I went like, "Whoops, let's do it." But Elizabeth, maybe just to come to a conclusion as well, if I can hand it over to you. I mean, we've seen some of the research results. What do you think? If you had to give us some advice in terms of how best for everyone to actually use this and what we should get out of this, what is your advice in terms of how this research can be used, and what is some of the thinking? What are some of the thought points that should come out of this?
Sure, and I'm not sure that it's about giving advice rather than just saying that what we would love to see is that this is not the end of the conversation, right? I think so often we launch a movement, or we put out a statement, or we have a campaign, and then it's sort of a year later we're in the same place. So I think that would be the biggest wish, is that we continue to drive this conversation. We've done a lot of talking now, but that we proactively reach out and hear from the industry, and hear from agencies, hear from the people creating the work. How are they tackling this? What are some of the things that they are doing? And perhaps we can compile like a broader list of ideas and action points that we can all subscribe to. So I think that would be my wish, is that this is only the start of the conversation. And then, I just want to reaffirm what Aviva said from Facebook's point of view. Beyond Bias is a workshop that we run for clients, for the industry. Please let us know if you want to partner on anything like that, or even if you have a better way to do it, and we'll partner with you on that. And join the Unstereotype Alliance. I think if there's one thing that we can all do, is support to the effort that's already there. And they're doing great work, and the South African chapter is slowly growing, but not fast enough. We need everyone to be part of it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Elizabeth. I agree with Elizabeth. One of the things we need to do is let's not stop the conversation. All this research really is, it's a conversation starter, allowing you to apply your mind to what's happening, and then take the conversation further and share it with as many people as possible. Elizabeth Nalty, Head of Marketing for Facebook Africa, and Aviv Whale, Head of Facebook Creative Shop at Facebook Africa. Thank you to the both of you for joining this conversation. Thanks for sharing your insights, and thank you for all the advice, inspiration, and support. Always appreciate Facebook's support towards Loeries and the entire creative community across Africa and the Middle East. So thank you so much for all of that, and appreciate your time. Yeah. To everyone who joined us, thank you so much. And to everyone who's going to be viewing this as well later, remember, if you do want access to this report, we're going to be making it available and sending out more information. So look out in your inbox to everyone who's subscribed to Loeries newsletter. And then also, if you do want to get access to this, info@loeries.com. So that email address again, info@loeries.com. You can request a copy of it if you do not see it in your inbox. Thank you to the both of you, Elizabeth and Aviv, and appreciate your time. Thanks for being part of the conversation.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for driving and leading it. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Take care. Have a good afternoon. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Fight the good fight.
Fight the good fight. There we go.
This is a good fight to fight. Let's do that. See you later.
Amazing. Cheers. Bye.
I have some questions. Some big questions. Can we hate less and share more love? Can we keep going until we cure every disease? Can we make sure nobody is left behind? Can we find the courage to go further than we have gone? Can we change our ways before it's too late? Can we push our limits beyond the sky? With technology and humanity, we can go further together. Vodacom. I have some questions. Some big questions. Can we hate less and share more love? Can we keep going until we cure every disease? Can we make sure nobody is left behind? Can we find the courage to go further than we have gone? Can we change our ways before it's too late? Can we push our limits beyond the sky? With technology and humanity, we can go further together. Vodacom.